So the Las Vegas Raiders bye week is officially behind us, and Antonio Pierce did the first presser since that bye week, and he gave us a ton of insight today, including that the Las Vegas Raiders are apparently sticking with Gardner Minshew as their starting quarterback. And today we're going to talk about what that means, plus there's some other information that's kind of coming out. There's some videos of Michael Mayer coming out of practice that looks really, really good. We'll talk about some of that a little bit later on as well, but let's start right away talking about Gardner Minshew. You know, the Raiders have at this point 8 games left. And in those 8 games, they got to figure out what they have as a football team. Some people wanted the Las Vegas Raiders to go forward with Desmond Ridder in the hopes that it gives you that same, that same flash of energy that we kind of got when Aiden O'Connell ultimately took over last year, and the Raiders ended up winning multiple games to ultimately finish the season on a strong note. And people were excited for Desmond Ridder to potentially come in, but I'll be honest with you guys. Watching the tape of that Bengals game where Desmond Ridder actually played, it did not look good. Now, to be fair, we did have some injuries on the offensive line, including that left tackle position. And we saw Thayer Munford pretty much get destroyed out there. He wasn't able to hold his own against, I believe it was Trey Hendrickson, who had like 4 or 5 sacks. And obviously, you know, that's one of the things you got to keep in mind when you're evaluating quarterback back like Desmond Ridder. But the thing is I don't think this situation is the same as last year's situation. You know, Jimmy G had an injury that the Raiders decided to just kind of overlook, and they signed him anyways, and that injury clearly had impacted him a lot. Aiden O'Connell made sense at that point because that quarterback was, you know, he was limited already, plus he had this injury on top of that. But with Gardner Minshew, we saw him last year actually have success with the Colts, specifically with the offensive coordinator / play caller in Shane Steichen. I guess he's technically their head coach. Gardner Minshew had success last year, and you know there wasn't an injury. There was really nothing different from last year to this year, minus the switch as the offensive coordinator. And with that, Gardner Minshew has looked really, really, really bad at times this season. Now, the unfortunate thing for the Raiders is, you know, on one drive they'll come out and they'll drive right downfield to score a touchdown. On the next drive, they drive right downfield and they'll get either 3 points to score a second touchdown. And then for the rest of the game, it's just bad. And then eventually it's turnovers and interceptions. And things just get worse and worse. And the Raiders are on a 5-game losing streak at this point. And a big part of that is essentially because that's been our offense up to this point. And what's interesting now is the Raiders had a decision to ultimately make that change. And they decided not to go down that route. Right? So they decided to stick with Gardner Minshew. To be honest, I think Minshew is the best quarterback on this roster. And I do think Wilkins was the guy that kind of limited him. But I'm also not 100% sure if, you know, do you want to win games at this point? Like, do you really, really want to win games? I'm going to say that Antonio Pierce does want to, right? And I know a lot of fans don't. But we got to figure out what we have with this roster, right? There's just so many moving parts. On top of that, Desmond Ridder, right? He looked bad when he played against the Bengals. He wasn't decisive in making his reads and getting the ball out. And some people actually have been saying this, and I don't know if there's actually any truth to this, that Wilkins has apparently at that time been told, maybe it was by AP, maybe it was Wilkins telling AP and making the decision by himself, but apparently Gardner Minshew was told not to turn the ball over and not to be aggressive, don't go out there and take those shots. And apparently Antonio Pierce is saying we're going to apparently let it loose now, right? I think those were his exact words in the presser today, that he wants to put the confidence in Gardner Minshew, and he wants this guy to go out there and just throw the football and be loose about it. And what's interesting is, if you guys look at the Bengals game, right? The Raiders came out and they threw the ball like 6-7 straight times, and they got all the way down to like the 30-yard line. And then they ran it in and they punched it in. And then they kind of got away from that philosophy of just throwing the football. And I think the Raiders would be better off just literally going out there and throwing the football. I think if the Raiders took a pass-first approach, they'd be better. And hopefully Scott Turner can potentially figure it out and get the best out of Gardner Minshew. I also want you guys to keep this in mind. You know, Ben Johnson for the Detroit Lions took over after being their pass game coordinator for 10 games. When he took over, the Lions got a spark because of Ben Johnson coming in. And Ben Johnson is now the hottest coaching candidate out there. Maybe Scott Turner can do that as well. And the thing is Antonio Pierce is not going to be fired. And I know people don't want to hear this, but AP is going to be here with the Raiders next year, right? That is what I'm hearing from a solid source. AP isn't going anywhere. So what that means is, what if Scott Turner is actually a good coach, right? What if in the next 8 games, the Raiders win 5 of those 8 games? And yeah, we don't make the playoffs and our draft stock goes down and we don't get that quarterback that we wanted. But what if Scott Turner ends up being the next Ben Johnson? I don't know if it's going to actually happen, but what if it actually happens? That means the Raiders will actually go into next season with AP and Patrick Graham running the defense, and then potentially a top 5 coaching candidate, and he'll probably be here for like 2 years. And that also means Gardner Minshew is probably going to be our quarterback going forward. And maybe you draft the rookie with, the 12th overall pick or the 8th overall pick, and you let that guy kind of sit for a year, maybe a couple of games, but you got to find out what you have, right? And I think there's just so many games left, and football's a weird sport. So many different things happen that I actually like the fact we're going forward with Gardner Minshew. I think it just makes sense at this point. But I will say this, just kind of end this segment, and before we get into the next one, Gardner Minshew should be on a short leash, right? He should have like one game, and let him have the entire game. Don't take him out. Don't bench him. Just let him have the entire game. And if he's unable to do it, then you can make that switch the following week. I'm sure Aiden Connell's coming back in the next week or two anyways as well. And then you can give Desmond Ridder a game or two to see what he kind of has. And then you can go to AOC to finish the season, and let's just see what we have with that, right? I think it just makes the most sense to kind of just go down this route. Let's just show a little bit of consistency as the season kind of comes to an end. In other news, and to me, in positive news, Jackson Powers-Johnson is slated to get another start at the center position against the Miami Dolphins. This is according to Antonio Pierce. Levi Edwards is also putting it out there in this tweet. He's saying the Raiders' second-round pick received a 90.6 offensive grade from Pro Football Focus, and he did not allow pressure against the Cincinnati Bengals. That's crazy if you guys ask me. I mean, really think about what that means. Not only did Jackson Powers-Johnson have a very, very, very high grade, he didn't give up a pressure. In a game where our offensive line got crushed, Jackson Powers-Johnson was not one of those guys that ultimately got crushed, and that's huge, right? And we've watched the tape with Powers-Johnson. This guy looked really, 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 really good against the Cincinnati Bengals. When I watch Powers-Johnson's tape, man, this guy just flashed play in, play out, and he's going to once again get another start against the Miami Dolphins. Now, this is not a permanent change, right? Andre James is just expected to be out once again. And we don't know how long he's going to be out for, right? From this point forward, maybe he's out for 2, 3, 4 more weeks. But truth be told, Jackson Powers-Johnson should just be your starting center going forward. I think there's more value in having a top 5 center than there is a top 5 guard, right? I think you can get away with having guards that are like top 20 guys, but having a top 5 center changes the entire offensive line. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs as a great example of that. The Chiefs have the best center in football right now, and they have guys, Trey Smith, I think he's good, right? I think he's like a top 20 guy. Joe Thuney is probably a top 15 guy, maybe top 10. And but the benefit really comes from that center, right? Creed Humphrey's the guy that really puts it together. And I think for the Raiders, you have a Creed Humphrey caliber guy. Truth be told, Jackson Powers-Johnson's a top 2 center. Like, I'm very, very confident to say that. And I think it just makes sense to keep this guy at center, even if Andre James gets healthy. Move that guy to guard. Let's see what he has there. Maybe let him play some tackle. I think he played that in college a little bit. Let's just see what Andre James has at a different position. Sometimes it could benefit a guy, right? Being a guard could potentially benefit Andre James. If he was able to be pretty good at center in his first couple of seasons, I don't see why he couldn't go to guard and be good at that guard position. When you have a top 2 to 5 center in Jackson Powers-Johnson, there's no reason not to let him play that position. And I know you can say, hey, well, for this year, let's just keep him at guard. It just doesn't make sense, right? It really does not make sense, because the snaps he takes at center right now will allow him to be that much better next year, right? So Jackson Powers-Johnson will get another start against the Miami Dolphins. And I suspect he's going to have a great game, right? PFF grades, in the past, I was not a believer of them, but to be honest with you guys, I think PFF grades do have some benefit, right? I work for the Hula Bowl, some of you guys know that. And one of the things we've learned is PFF grades are actually a lot better based off the way they use these tracking tools. They use artificial intelligence to come up with these grades, and then they'll have former NFL scouts and higher ups within the NFL circles and those type of things. They'll have those guys spot check these grades as well. And they're almost right like 98% of the time, right? So, Powers-Johnson having a high grade does not surprise me. And then, of course, the Las Vegas Raiders got their tight end back yesterday. Michael Mayer came back to the Raiders. I'm going to let you guys watch some of these clips. You can see Michael Mayer actually looks pretty healthy in these clips. Like, it doesn't look like he looks slower. Sometimes when you watch guys come back from an extended amount of time, they look slower, right? Like even when guys come in a preseason, that very first game, they look slower. They look a little sluggish. They got to get the pads on and kind of get the feel for it, get right. It doesn't really look like Michael Mayer looks that way, and it's been like 8-9 weeks since this guy's really been playing or practicing for that matter. But he looks good out there as he was kind of running around. There's multiple people that posted multiple clips. But I'm excited to see what we get out of Michael Mayer as we go forward. We're going to get a 12 personnel package with, a guy who was, the 35th overall pick. Like, he was literally almost a first-round pick last year. And then another guy that was essentially a first-round pick in Brock Bowers. And we're going to get to see what these two guys bring to the Raiders. And I suspect, man, the Raiders are going to have a really good day on the offense side of the football. Because you get both of these two guys back. Jacoby Myers is coming back fully healthy, right? Last time he played against the Bengals, he wasn't really healthy. But now he's had an entire week to rest. Madison's back fully healthy. He's ready to go. Zamir White is back fully healthy. I guess Zamir White's the guy that kind of got hurt. It wasn't actually Madison. But both guys are going to get right, and both guys should be able to go. And then we'll see what Scott Turner can do with guys like Trey Tucker. We'll see what they can do with some of these other guys as well that we have. I'm excited to see what ends up happening with Michael Mayer, Brock Bowers. You guys can see your boy Q put out some photos. You got Scott Turner as well as wide receivers coach Edgar Bennett. Just kind of going over the plays. I would be interested to see what they're kind of discussing. So there's that. And then, of course, you also got Norv Turner in the building. So here's Norv Turner also in the building, looking directly at the camera. Norv Turner is out there, man. He's going to do his thing. Hopefully he benefits this coaching staff, right? Hopefully the Raiders, if they are able to win some games, if that's ultimately what they're trying to do, hopefully as the Raiders kind of do that and as they kind of go forward, hopefully it's because of the offensive coordinator, right? I don't want the Raiders to win because our defense is a top 5 defense and Jack Jones gets another pick 6. I want our offense to be the reason why we win football games, right? I want our quarterback to be the reason why we win football games. Maybe it's Jacoby Myers, maybe it's Trey Tucker, and these guys go for 150 yards or whatever it is. I want those guys to be the difference as why the Raiders win football games, not the defense, because we know what this defense ultimately is. And then finally, let's just wrap this video up. Deion Sanders gave some love to Raiders coach Antonio Pierce. He was asked about the idea of the Las Vegas Raiders drafting his son, and Deion Sanders said for his son to be drafted by the Raiders, that would be nice. They have a wonderful head coach and president, and they have a nice stadium. He said Antonio Pierce is a great man. He's a great leader. He earned the job. I love what he brings. Shout out to Coach Prime, man. Shout out to Deion Sanders for giving some love to Antonio Pierce. I've been very critical of Coach Pierce. If AP is able to get the guys to rally together, and if Scott Turner is able to be a competent offensive coordinator, and if the Raiders actually win some football games as we go forward, maybe the Raiders actually have success next year as well. And maybe it's a guy like Shadir Sanders. Remember, Sanders does not have a first-round grade. This guy's not projected to be a top 5 pick, right? Sanders right now has a second-round grade by a lot of teams. In fact, there are some teams that actually value other quarterbacks ahead of Sanders. So there's a chance that Sanders even ends up falling to like pick 15 or whatever. And never overlook the fact that Patrick Mahomes wasn't the first overall pick. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts was not the first overall pick. These are some of the best quarterbacks we have in the NFL right now. So it's going to be an interesting season, however you look at it, man. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm excited for some real football to come up, and I'm excited to watch some of these guys. Powers Johnson, Glaze, Colton Miller supposed to be back this week as well. Hopefully the Raiders are able to put it together and get a win against the Dolphins. The Dolphins aren't as good, in my opinion, as they were last year. It seems like Mike McDaniel has slowed down a little bit, although it could be because of Tua, and he's the guy that slowed down. We'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.